Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into the hazy heat of ancient Egypt, right into the dust-swirled belly of a pyramid construction site. You're standing at the base of the Giza Plateau, where towering limestone blocks litter the ground like a cosmic game of Tetris gone slightly wrong. Sun glints off rough-cut stones, half-buried tools, and the occasional stray linen wrap someone definitely meant to wash 3 days ago. You take a slow breath. The air smells like crushed rock, roasted onions, and ambition. All around you, barefoot workers carry rope-wrapped logs, chanting in rhythm. 2 men argue nearby, heatedly, passionately, and entirely over something you don't yet understand. But one thing's clear. Everyone's tense. The pyramid that will one day scrape the clouds has paused mid-rise, and it's not because the lunch wagon's late. You probably won't survive this if you forget to hydrate. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. I always love seeing who's listening and where from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start to wander, moving carefully between heaps of quarried stone. The pyramid looms above, not quite finished, its stepped profile sharply slicing the dawn sky. You're just in time for what will later be remembered, if at all, as the great architectural argument of Dynasty 4. A scribe glances at you with mild amusement as he jots in a reed notebook. "You picked quite the morning to arrive," he mutters. They're back at it. And there they are, 2 master builders locked in conversation so civil it loops back into dangerous. On the left, there's Nsemkau, a wiry figure with sunburned cheeks, who gestures animatedly with a triangular tool. 55 degrees, he insists. It's not just elegant. It deflects the sun's gaze like the cheek of Ra himself. Across from him, squinting with all the serenity of a brick wall, is Tamos, the older of the 2. His tunic is cleaner somehow. He nods slowly before countering. 51. That's what keeps a pyramid standing after flood, famine, or, gods forbid, goat. They've had this argument every day for 3 weeks. You're told it began during a conversation about shadow angles and turned into a quiet war about divine proportion, personal legacy, and which builder once miscalculated a step pyramid in front of 30 royal courtiers. Historians still argue, the scribe adds casually, whether either of them had it right in the first place. You keep moving, partly to avoid getting roped into an argument about base-to-height ratios. Workers pass you, balanced and precise. Some carry stone tools. Others just mutter about how hot the rock is today. There's one detail you notice quickly. This isn't a disorganized frenzy of activity. It's measured chaos, like a symphony of sweat. A boy no older than 13 runs by with a basket of chisel heads. His sandals flap like bird wings. A worker calls after him, "Tell the angle boys to stop changing the plans every morning." In truth, the pyramid is currently leaning toward Nsemkau's vision, a 55-degree slope that gives the structure a towering blade-like look. But every few days, workers are quietly instructed to adjust slightly, which is to say, undo several hundred pounds of work. In the corner of the site, a half-built ramp leads upward, not quite matching anything else on site. They were going for dramatic, someone mutters nearby. Ended up with confusing. As you rest in the thin sliver of shade between a granite block and a broken wheelbarrow, a worker hands you a small clay cup of tamarind water. "You knew?" he asks, then doesn't wait for an answer. "Doesn't matter. Just remember, Never say the words lope around both of them at once. There's laughter, not unfriendly, from a nearby shade tent where scribes and junior architects gather. You overhear one say, maybe they'll settle it with a game of Senate. Loser gets to chisel the whole Western face. Despite the subtle tension, the site hums with something else too. Purpose. It's not just ego or mathematics, it's legacy. You begin to sense that every angle, every degree, will be weighed by eternity, or at least by a priest with a feather and a long afternoon to kill. As the sun rises higher, casting crisp shadows from block edges onto the sand, you make your way to a ledge that gives you a decent view of the whole plateau. From here, it becomes clear. These builders are not just stacking stone. They're stacking meaning. Every slope is a message. Every inch of incline, a philosophy. And two philosophies have never been so politely furious. Below, Nesemkau and Ptahmos have stopped speaking again, each pacing in different directions. One mutters about celestial alignment, the other about foundational integrity. You don't need to speak ancient Egyptian to understand the words, again, and always you. Suddenly, a group of apprentices rushes through the site with a wooden board and a string compass. They set something down, measure, then look at each other uncertainly. One speaks up. This line curves. Everyone groans. Again. You get the distinct sense that no one is sleeping well these days, except maybe the site cats, who are currently napping in the exact center of the planned burial chamber. The angle argument, it seems, is far from over. You duck into the planning tent. Well, more of a linen awning strung between 4 support poles and weighed down with jars of black ink and crushed ochre. Inside, the air smells like hot reeds and overused patience. Long wooden tables groan under the weight of scrolls, models, and crumbly fig cakes no one dares throw away. A breeze rattles a curtain and almost knocks over a delicate string compass. You save it just in time, earning a half-hearted thumbs up from the youngest apprentice, who clearly hasn't slept in 3 days. Here is where the real arguing happens, not loud, but persistent. Nesemkau hunches over a papyrus sheet dotted with star symbols, sketching pyramid angles overlaid with celestial alignments. It's divine math, he murmurs. The angle points toward Sopdet, the dog star. The queen's soul follows it. Across the room, Thamos responds without lifting his eyes, unless it collapses under its own divine ambition. You don't say anything. You just ease yourself onto a crate that smells like sesame oil and hear a young assistant mutter, "They've redrawn the same ramp 9 times. He's not exaggerating. The scrolls are a maze of erasure marks, red ink corrections, and side notes like, "Try steeper but less dramatic," or "Ask priest again, re-sun angles." A 3-dimensional model of the pyramid sits on a side table, half made from clay, half whittled wood, surrounded by miniature pulley systems and tiny ropes like a school project sponsored by Ra. One slightly charred scroll bears a sketch of an angle labeled simply, "No." Someone offers you a date cake and quietly warns, "If you spill crumbs on the base plans, that's how we got that weird slope last week." The tension in the room isn't hostile. It's more like academic agony. These aren't laborers. They're thinkers, mathematicians, engineers. Half of them wear their eyeliner smudged from squinting into sunrise while calculating arc lengths on cliff faces. One man uses a knotted rope with beads every 10 units. So the king's chamber doesn't tilt awkwardly toward Memphis, he explains, with all the intensity of someone who's argued about tilt for most of his adult life. Mainstream historians generally agree that Egyptian pyramid builders used a grid-based system anchored in rudimentary geometry, measuring angles with plumb lines and leveling devices like the Merkhet. But one scholar you overhear today thinks the angle was chosen purely for aesthetic power. "What says eternal more than a perfect triangle?" he grumbles, drawing triangles in the air like a sorcerer with carpal tunnel. Of course, fringe theories float around even here. One architect, wearing an amulet shaped like a cat yawning, insists the original 55-degree angle was inspired by a sacred triangle seen in a dream, possibly after he drank unfiltered pomegranate beer during flood season. Historians still argue whether any of them truly knew what would last, murmurs the senior scribe, now brushing sand off a fresh diagram with the gentleness of someone polishing a god. At one end of the tent is the sacred angle wall. This is where they've pinned sheets showing different slope experiments, including one failed draft from a rival architect named Kiti, who once proposed a 62-degree model. It toppled during a monsoon and is now used as a stable for camels. Too ambitious, someone says whenever the sketch comes up. You see the current debate boiled down to a single side-by-side comparison. One sharp triangle like a dagger rising skyward, the other broad and gradual, like a rising sun. Nesemkau clutches a string triangle and draws it across a star map. At this angle, the queen reaches her place among the stars by month 6. Thamos doesn't flinch. And by month 6, your angle's south face will sink into the sand. This is where things take a curious turn. A young planner slides over a dusty record from an older tomb construction further south, near Saqqara. It shows evidence of a shift in foundational stability when slopes exceeded 52 degrees on clay-based soil. It's just enough fuel to spark a new round of murmurs and chalk measurements on the planning floor. The question floats again. What's more important? Celestial alignment or architectural stability? A few skeptics within the tent suggest a third option: compromise, a midpoint angle. 53 degrees, one whispers, as if invoking an ancient curse. But Nesemkau hears and groans. 53 is the coward's angle. Even the room's cat, a chunky calico named Hennetzen, makes a noise that sounds like agreement. At some point, you're handed a small triangle cut from ebony wood. It fits neatly into your palm. Go test it in the sand model, someone suggests. You do, and find that at exactly 55 degrees, the model looks fierce but unsteady. At 51, it looks calm, and maybe just a bit boring. The debate doesn't stop. It probably never will, because at the heart of all this geometry lies something bigger: immortality. And when you're designing the staircase to eternity, every angle feels like a judgment call from the gods. The sun outside shifts, casting new light into the tent. It hits a sheet of gold leaf used to trace the pyramid's projected capstone. For just a moment, everything gleams. No one says it aloud, but you realize they're not just building for Pharaoh. They're building to outlast him. Out in the sun again, the air buzzes. Not just with heat, but with purpose. This part of the site is where all the arguments inside the tent take on a physical form. You watch a line of workers, barefoot, dusty, humming in unison, tugging on thick ropes looped around a sled. On it, a single limestone block, easily the size of a small garden shed, grinds forward inch by inch. Someone ahead pours water onto the sand to reduce friction. A few others just shout encouragement, occasionally switching to insults when the block hits a rut. You sidestep a spillage of date mash near a row of clay cups. Apparently, A junior overseer tripped while trying to multitask water duty and flirting with the basket weaver's daughter. Historians still argue whether ancient Egypt had official workplace safety regulations, mutters a man next to you, who promptly slips in the same spot. From your new vantage point, the pyramid's profile rises again in the near distance, now partially obscured by the framework of scaffolding and makeshift ramps. Here's where the angle dispute becomes a daily headache. Every shift in slope affects the materials, the measurements, and the muscles of every worker hauling stone. One supervisor, arms like braided rope, tells you plainly, when they change the angle, we redo 3 weeks of hauling. He squints. If Nessim Cow wins, I'm going to start charging him per degree. The workers, for the most part, don't seem invested in the architectural philosophy. They're too busy trying not to drop their building blocks. Still, you notice that some prefer Tamoz's gentler slope. It requires longer ramps, but less strain per haul. Others admire Nesemkau's steeper incline. Less walking, they joke, but more yelling when things slip. One of the sled pullers tells you about the Great Slope Day, when an entire shift labored under the assumption that the pyramid angle had been finalized, only for Nesemkau to declare the alignment aesthetically wobbly. Several blocks had to be shifted a full cubit to the left. A rebellion of sighs echoed across the site. You passed by a few carts carrying tools, wooden levels, knotted ropes for angle checking, stone weights, and even a curious contraption made of copper rods and string that looks suspiciously like an early laser pointer's humble ancestor. That's the line checker, a toolkeeper says. It's supposed to help keep the slope consistent. Then he laughs, assuming they pick a slope. At a shade station nearby, laborers sip water from clay jugs, some munching on lentil cakes and leeks. You overhear someone mutter, "If the afterlife has stairs, I hope they're flat." Despite the jokes, the workers have deep respect for the project. "This isn't just a building," one says quietly. "This is where the pharaoh becomes a star." Then he bites into an onion like it owes him money. You watch a young boy lead a donkey toward the ramp, his face focused, his pace careful. The donkey carries polished granite, one of the casing stones that will eventually gleam like sunlight when placed at the base. But if the angle changes again, some of these stones may no longer fit properly. Even the animals seem mildly exasperated. A team of engineers walks by, pointing at slope lines drawn into the dirt, arguing about the load-bearing capacity of the base. "If we widen it for the steeper angle," one says, "we'll need more limestone." From where exactly? Memphis isn't going to donate. These aren't small adjustments. They ripple outward like dropped stones in a still pool. 1 degree shift could require months of extra labor, and no one's entirely sure which choice future centuries will applaud or curse. You pass a scribe sketching a diagram in the dirt with his stylus. He explains, unasked, that pyramid slopes also carry spiritual symbolism. The triangle mimics the rays of the sun descending to earth, he says dreamily. A stairway to the gods. Then he sneezes and erases his own diagram by accident. Nearby, a rumor starts to float. Nesemkau is planning to consult a temple priest about sacred geometries. Someone groans. Last time that happened, we had to tilt the entire north face for a goose constellation. Through all of this, you feel the strange energy of a place where sacred dreams meet human limitations, where massive structures depend on coffee-colored ink, morning arguments, and whether enough oxen show up to pull granite uphill on a Wednesday. The pyramid is more than stone. It's decisions, thousands of them, layered and jammed together like dates in a festival cake. Right now, The biggest decision, angle, remains unsolved. But the work doesn't stop. It can't. As the sun peaks, casting sharp edges and long shadows across the plateau, someone yells for help with a runaway block. It's caught quickly, no harm done, but the tension spikes. Everyone's reminded how precarious this balance is, between vision and gravity. And as you sit down on a cool stone at the edge of the ramp, watching the endless push and pull, you wonder, will anyone remember the architects who argued, or just the angle that made it to the sky? As the heat of the day softens into amber twilight, you find yourself lingering near the communal fire pits. Here, with bellies full of lentils and wheat bread, and fingers sticky with honey residue, the workers and thinkers stop hauling stones and start hauling opinions. You slide into a circle of squatters, builders, draftsmen, one temple astrologer, and a camel driver who somehow got roped into the conversation. The topic, unsurprisingly, is the angle. Nasemkau holds court near a half-drunk jug of fermented barley drink, now resting atop an unused plumb line. He draws a line in the sand with a reed, pointing it skyward towards Sirius. When the queen dies, he explains, her Ka follows this path. The slope must mirror her ascent. A young mason squints. But can her Ka haul a 5-ton block? The circle chuckles. Tamos, his robes less pristine by firelight, taps his knee and replies, if her soul wants a shortcut to the stars, maybe she should walk sideways. More laughter. Even Hanutzen the cat appears, flopping beside someone's sandal with the gravitas of a high priest. Someone mentions the Maidam Pyramid, how it collapsed midway, likely due to over-ambition in slope. 55 degrees again, notes the astrologer. A cursed angle. Historians still argue whether the Maidam collapse was from poor design, shoddy foundations, or sheer arrogance. Someone says, tearing a chunk of bread. The conversation wanders from pyramid physics to personal superstition. One worker swears his cousin's cousin saw a divine ibis fly due west on a full moon, the direction that supposedly favors 52-degree inclines. Bird knows best, he shrugs, as if that settles it. Around the fire, you're handed a steaming bowl of spiced lentils. A boy beside you whispers, "Want to hear a theory?" Of course you do. He unrolls a scrap of hide where someone's drawn an inverted triangle, wide at the top, tapering downward into the earth. The secret burial pyramid, he says with the glee of a 9-year-old explaining dragons. What if they're building the slope wrong side up? What if the queen is supposed to go into the earth, not up? You nod sagely and offer him your last date as payment for that mental image. Above you, the stars are out now. Thousands of them, smeared across the black like crushed pearls. It's easy to see why Nasemkau is obsessed. His entire plan hinges on lining up the western shaft with the rising of Sirius at a particular time of year. When he's sober, he'll tell you it's about divine cycles. When he's not, he'll tell you it's personal. She visited me in a dream, said, "Nisi, don't screw up my stairs." As fire embers crackle, someone asks the temple astrologer if all these angles really matter. Would the queen's soul know the difference between 51 and 55 degrees? The priest stirs his drink thoughtfully. Maybe not, but the gods would. You find yourself again contemplating the idea that one person's spiritual map is another's engineering nightmare. Somewhere near the breadbasket, a man scribbles figures into clay. How many blocks it takes to shift a slope by 1 degree, how many days of labor that costs, and whether it's worth it. Building a pyramid, he mutters, is just math, mud, and moments of divine panic. You smile at that, letting the warm air fold over you like a linen shawl. These debates, while ancient, feel oddly modern, like arguing over whether your website should load faster or look fancier. Function versus philosophy, sacred versus stable. The fire dims, but the conversation doesn't stop. Another team member starts drawing triangles in the sand, this time aligned with the curve of the horizon. A younger apprentice pulls out a piece of ebony wood shaped like a tiny, perfect triangle and places it gently on the sand. 52.5 degrees, she says softly. Just feels right. No one argues. Not tonight. Somewhere, a camel snorts, perhaps in agreement. As the fire burns lower and the moon casts soft shadows across the still-forming pyramid, you sense that no decision has been made. But something has changed. A kind of shared fatigue, yes, but also mutual respect. These aren't rivals, not really. They're co-authors. Their disagreements are the friction that keeps the vision sharp. You yawn, and someone passes you a jug of lukewarm beer that tastes faintly of raisins and sand. It's awful. You love it. Above, the stars shift imperceptibly, the dog star still rising. And tomorrow, the argument will resume, with string and stone, sweat and sand, triangles and dreams. Back inside the planning chamber the next morning, the mood is part courtroom drama, part high-stakes boardroom pitch, and just a touch of divine consultation. You step into the thick of it, lamp smoke in the air, tension wound tighter than a harp string. Nesemkau and Ptamos are hunched over a wooden table where several scale models of pyramids lean precariously at slightly different slopes. One's marked 51 degrees, another 53 degrees, and a third, nearly vertical, is labeled ambitious. Your model, Ptamos says, tapping the steepest one, would collapse in a strong breeze. My model, Nesemkau replies with theatrical calm, would make Ra himself pause mid-flight. Around them, younger architects shuffle papyrus rolls, checking calculations, adjusting string lines, and trying very hard not to be noticed. You stand quietly near a stone column, decorated with painted lotus buds, and pretend to admire the mural behind them, one showing a serene queen walking up a triangular beam of sunlight. They're not arguing just about angles today. Now it's about vision, legacy, and a little thing called budget. Limestone is not infinite, Ptamos says, pinching the bridge of his nose. And we're already over by 50 workers and 3 sacred goats. Borrow the goats, Nesemkau shoots back. We can return them mildly divine. You suppress a laugh. No one else dares. One of the apprentices pulls you aside and whispers, historians still argue whether these slope debates were practical concerns or ego battles in disguise. Then he glances nervously at the architects and adds, honestly, probably both. Behind the table, a wide piece of papyrus serves as the current master plan, full of red ink adjustments, crossed out angles, and notes in 3 different handwriting styles, one of which appears to be angry hieroglyphic ducks. They're stuck, not just mathematically, but philosophically. Nesemkau's plan calls for symmetry aligned with celestial coordinates. He claims that the slope must match the Queen's birth star arc, a theory that requires angles precise to fractions of a degree. Ptamos counters with pragmatism. Longer base, gentler slope, smoother build, no disasters. If you want her spirit to fly, he says, maybe don't crush it under rubble. Poetic, Nesemkau replies, but uninspired. The tension rises. Someone knocks over a model pyramid. It shatters on the stone floor with a soft pack. Everyone freezes. "Symbolic," mutters the scribe near the wall. You walk slowly to the back of the room where several reference scrolls are kept. Among them are slope records from older pyramids. The step pyramid at Saqqara, shorter, more tiered. The bent pyramid at Dashur, which infamously changed its slope halfway up. And the much-respected Great Pyramid's earlier iteration. The pattern? Trial and error. You run your finger along one line of commentary. To build a lasting legacy, one must first pick the right hill. You consider sharing it, then think better of it. Suddenly, a side door creaks open, and in walks a temple emissary holding a square of polished obsidian. "Divination tool," he says, "for alignment testing." "Oh good," Tamos says. "Now the stars will settle it." The obsidian is placed on the table, tilted toward a shaft of morning light. The reflected beam is supposed to hit a mark on the far wall that represents ideal passage. Instead, it lands on a basket of onions. "That," someone mutters, "can't be good." Still, the day continues. Measurements are taken, models are adjusted. The team creates a new hybrid sketch combining the two primary proposals: Nesemkau's sharp angle as inspiration, Tamos's base stability as foundation. A compromise? Perhaps. A truce? Unclear. The queen herself never appears. She's off in another wing of the palace, probably enjoying chilled date wine and blissful ignorance. Or maybe she knows exactly what's happening and just prefers the drama secondhand. You take a seat near the open window. A breeze stirs the scrolls, ruffling sketches and notes. One diagram flutters to the floor, showing a pyramid at a bold, impossible 60 degrees with wings drawn on either side. Someone's joke? Or an ancient intern dreaming big? Down in the distance, you can still hear the clang of chisels and the shouted rhythm of workers pulling ropes in unison. Out there, the slope is more than an argument. It's a reality of back strain, blisters, and heat stroke. In here, it's still theory, but theory that's getting closer. As the light shifts, someone makes a final note on the hybrid plan. 52 degrees, adjusted base width, sunrise alignment, possible. It's not victory, but it's progress. And as Ptahmos and Nesemkau lean over the new diagram together, not arguing but actually nodding, you feel something shift in the room. Not just consensus, but quiet pride. They might just pull this off, assuming no one brings in a goose astrologer again. You stretch, blink, and breathe in the faint scent of ink, warm stone, and the dry sweetness of nearby fig trees. Outside, the pyramid waits. Mid-morning on the plateau hits like a chisel to the skull. The sun blasts down with that specific Egyptian confidence. It's not trying to impress anyone. It just knows it's in charge. You squint upward, watching a team of 50 workers straining to haul a sled stacked with limestone blocks up a gently sloped ramp. Their chants echo across the site like the pulse of the day. Two foremen walk alongside the rope lines, clapping every fifth beat, their voices hoarse but steady. This is what slope looks like in practice. At the base of the pyramid, the foundation tier is nearly complete. Every block laid so far has followed Tamos's careful grid. Strings, plumb bobs, and countless curses in old Egyptian muttered between mouthfuls of dried figs. You step around a pile of tools, chisels, baskets, hand levels made from wood and string, and a triangular prism someone's carved with crude little suns along the edge. You pick it up. One of the workers notices. "Angle tester," he grunts. We lose those all the time. The cats steal them. You blink. The cats? He nods. They like the shape. Chew on them. Curse from Bastet, maybe. A few meters away, a group is taking a break under the shade of a half-built platform. They sip weak beer from cracked clay cups and debate whether the slope should be flatter in the heat. Easier on the knees, one says. Another insists. Harder to impress the gods. You crouch next to an engineer, young, slightly sunburnt, but with a look of sleepy determination. She's scratching numbers into a plank with a bit of charcoal. Every angle adds days, she murmurs. Flatter means wider base. Wider base means more quarry runs. More quarry runs mean more donkeys. You nod, impressed. She adds, and more donkeys means more poop. Fair point. The team beside her is experimenting with a miniature ramp system, using small rocks and palm fiber rope. They've placed tiny sleds with pebbles as blocks, trying to simulate different incline angles. Their current model tilts precariously, and a pebble slides off, bouncing into the sand. Too steep, one mutters. Queen's spirit might fall off. You're starting to realize just how much effort goes into translating "let's build a triangle" into something livable, scalable, and spiritually bulletproof. It's not enough to honor the heavens. You also have to make sure nobody dies rolling a sacred brick uphill. Farther up the ramp, a sled jerks awkwardly, and a limestone block tilts. The foreman shouts. Ropes tighten. Dust plumes into the air. It holds, for now. Someone behind you mutters. Historians still argue whether these ramps wrapped around the pyramid in spirals or ran straight up the face. You glance toward the workers dragging the block and think, they're probably not interested in that debate today. Back near the base, an older builder named Jet sits sharpening a chisel. His beard is dusted white from stone powder. He gestures you over. 50 degrees, he says. Hurts the back. 55? He groans for effect. 55 makes your knees turn to porridge. You ask what he thinks the perfect slope is. He holds up 3 fingers. 51. That's the sweet spot. Gods are happy. Back doesn't quit. Also, you can still carry a lunch basket without it tipping over. You chuckle. Someone hands Jet a piece of honeycomb wrapped in linen. He bites into it like it's ambrosia. Nearby, a group of scribes is huddled around a fresh slab of limestone that's been laid too far off center. They argue in hushed tones, unsure whether to log the mistake or pretend it never happened. The Queen's ghost won't notice, one whispers. Will she? But one apprentice insists. Every inch matters. He scratches out the error in his papyrus log and begins recalculating slope correction values by hand. All around you, the pyramid continues to rise, but it's not just built of stone. It's built from repetition, recalculation, small arguments, and large sweat stains. You step onto one of the ramps yourself. It's wide, dust-packed, and grooved by hundreds of sled runs. As you walk up slowly, feeling the incline in your calves, you look out over the Nile glimmering far below. Even the river seems impressed by the ambition. At the top of the current tier, a bucket brigade is passing along jars of water. A young worker hands one to you without a word. It's lukewarm and a little gritty, but glorious all the same. You sit there for a moment, breathing it all in. The grind of stone, the murmur of plans, the yawning blue sky that seems impossibly close. And you realize something simple but profound. Building a pyramid isn't about getting it perfect from the start. It's about adjusting constantly, stone by stone, footstep by footstep, until the vision finally matches reality, or at least doesn't collapse under its own ambition. You lean back on your elbows, watching as two cats stalk across a scaffold, tailing a lizard who has no idea he's in a divine construction zone. Below, another block is raised. Another chant begins. The slope holds, for now. As the sun finally dips behind the limestone cliffs, the worksite softens. The rasp of chisels fades. The clatter of sleds and shouted counts is replaced by the low hum of evening. You breathe in the cooling air, dry and tinged with charcoal, crushed herbs, and distant laughter. Welcome to the pyramid by moonlight. You're sitting on a half-finished ledge, feet dangling over the edge. Below, braziers flicker to life one by one, casting golden halos over stone and sand. The shadows move like silent priests, stretching and shrinking as the fires settle into their rhythm. Down at the ground level, someone is roasting onions near a pile of sandals. Another group of workers has spread a woven mat and begun a slow game of senet. One young man cheats outrageously, but no one seems to mind. He's funny about it. You stretch your legs, watching as Nesimkow wanders past, now quieter than he's been all day. He doesn't notice you, too busy scribbling in a leather-bound notebook. A small oil lamp hangs from a pole above him, and the light dances across his fingers as he sketches yet another angle. His robes are dust-stained, and his sandals have completely given up trying to look professional. He stops, measures something on the stone with a length of knotted cord, mutters, "Off by a whisker," and scribbles some more. Nearby, Tammuz sits with a cup of sour beer, staring at the stars. His beard catches the firelight like woven gold. He glances over as you approach and pats the stone beside him. "Do you know," he begins without looking at you, "there are more types of triangle than there are kinds of priest?" You raise an eyebrow. "Some triangles obey the stars. Some obey the queen. And some," he sighs, "just want to fall over dramatically." You both chuckle quietly. You ask him if he thinks the angle debate is settled. He shakes his head slowly. Historians still argue whether the final slope was chosen by consensus, accident, or sheer exhaustion. He raises his cup in salute. "My money's on exhaustion." Around you, the camp winds down. The stone-carrying donkeys are asleep, or at least pretending to be. Several workers have taken to braiding reeds into absurdly long cords, giggling at the idea of lassoing a passing ibis. One scribe is carefully transcribing a lullaby into the corner of a blueprint because future generations deserve rhythm. You tilt your head back and let your eyes follow the curve of the pyramid up into the night sky. It's beginning to take shape, not just physically, but in people's minds. You hear workers whispering now about our pyramid as though they dreamed it up themselves. A cat purrs past your feet and curls into a coil on a still warm slab. Somewhere, someone plays a single-note melody on a reed flute, off-key but with heart. Then a commotion breaks the calm. A young apprentice bursts into the firelight, holding a clay model and shouting, "I found a better angle!" Everyone groans. "I mean it," he insists. "It's mathematically perfect and aligns with the moon's shadow line." Nesimkow glances up from his sketches. "Does it involve rebuilding everything?" The apprentice hesitates. "Possibly." "Then no." The crowd laughs. Even the donkeys look vaguely amused, but the boy isn't disheartened. He sits cross-legged and begins building a new model anyway, muttering to himself about shadows and spirit staircases. You admire his stubbornness. Some of the best disasters in history started just that way. You take another look at the structure in progress, now wrapped in silence and stars. A few torches illuminate the scaffolding like a golden skeleton. From this angle, it already looks eternal. In your lap, a bit of leftover rope sits coiled. You absently knot it into the shape of a triangle. Somehow, it seems appropriate. Next to you, Tamos hums softly, a tune from his childhood maybe, or one of those melodies you invent on the spot and forget just as quickly. He finishes his drink, sighs and murmurs. In the end, it's not just about the slope. It's about whether it stands when the wind comes. You nod. The wind has already started, a soft whisper across the sand, cooling the stone underfoot, carrying away dust, arguments, dreams. You yawn, just slightly. The pyramid glows golden in places where the torches catch its still, rough face. It's not finished, not even close, but it's growing. Like all good stories, it's being built in layers, angles debated, plans revised, stones set in place by calloused hands under stars that never blink. And just below your dangling feet, someone begins singing again. A slow tune, probably off-pitch, but somehow exactly right. The next morning arrives not with a trumpet call or divine vision, but with someone stepping on your foot. You jolt awake under a linen shade awning, rubbing your eyes as sand sifts down your tunic. The foot's owner, a half-asleep scribe named Renef, mumbles an apology and offers you a strip of dried fig in penance. You accept. Fig makes everything better. Around you, the planning zone is already buzzing. Today is Angle Day. You trudge toward a clearing marked off with ropes and stones. This is where the intellectuals gather, not just the official architects, but the foremen, the rope measurers, the enthusiastic amateurs who just want to argue about triangles. Someone's drawn a chalk diagram in the sand, 2 pyramid profiles side by side, marked Ptamo's ideal and Nesemkau compromise. You stand over them, watching as a young assistant slowly brushes away the profile labeled Uncle Jet's knee saver. The slope was too gentle, they say. More like a royal patio than a divine staircase. Nesemkau arrives last, carrying an elaborate model made of palm wood, string, and papyrus flags. You know, he says, we wouldn't be having this debate if people could just agree on gravity. Tamos doesn't look up. Gravity didn't hire us. The Queen did. The 2 men stand in silence. Then someone sneezes directly onto the model. So begins a heated, absurdly well-mannered disagreement. You sit beside a bowl of blackened dates, listening as the argument veers wildly from geometry to theology. Tamos wants a 51-degree angle, traditional, sacred, slightly backbreaking. Nesemkau argues for 53 degrees, bolder, more mathematically elegant, and, as he puts it, good for the soul and the skyline. Historians still argue whether these discussions were practical or symbolic, mutters a nearby apprentice while taking notes. But either way, everyone ended up yelling about shadow lengths. It's not all shouting. Between rounds, one of the engineers offers roasted barley. Another passes out cool melon slices from a shaded basket, and everyone settles into a more philosophical tone. What's the angle of eternity? Someone asks. The one that doesn't fall down, someone else replies. You're not sure who wins the debate, but by midday, they've agreed to test both slopes on the next construction tier, side-by-side mini-ramps, same materials, same teams. a literal pyramid race. The winner gets bragging rights and the approval of a queen who might only glance at it once before commissioning an obelisk instead. Back at the site, laborers set up the dual ramps like it's a festival game. There's even a goat tied nearby as the unofficial judge. The creature headbutts anyone who stands still too long, which keeps things moving. Team Pitamos begins stacking their sleds with grim efficiency, using shorter hauls and tighter rope tension. Their chant is deep and rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Team Nesemkau, in contrast, opts for fewer workers per sled but longer strides. They move like dancers, flowing up their steeper incline with surprising grace. You move between the teams, noting how the air smells faintly of sweat, mint poultices, and crushed limestone. Your sandals slip slightly in the dust, and you realize that both slopes have their challenges. Someone slips on Team Nesemkau's ramp and flops into the sand. He laughs, brushing himself off. "Stairs of the gods," he says. "Maybe they're not made for feet." By sunset, both ramps are piled with sample blocks. The architects return to measure stone stability, wear patterns, rope strain. You overhear words like cohesion, weathering, and divine optics. No one agrees on anything, but everyone agrees it's been an invigorating day. You walk back toward camp as the light fades, your head buzzing with triangles and banter. At the edge of the ramp, you notice someone has carved a tiny sunburst into a cornerstone. Just decorative? A symbol of divine light? A secret builder signature? You don't know. But in this place, where shadows matter as much as stones and gods are consulted with chalk and sweat, it fits right in. The next layer of the pyramid is going up faster now. Not because the angle debate is resolved, far from it, but because eventually, the stone doesn't wait for consensus. It just waits for hauling. You're up early again, standing near the freshly delivered limestone blocks. Some are still damp with morning dew. Others bear the reddish scrawls of recent calculations, some of which look suspiciously like personal notes. "Don't trust Keepa's slope math," and "Reminder, borrow sandals back from Beck." A mason nearby sharpens his copper chisel, eyes still half closed, rhythmically scraping against the whetstone with the lazy determination of a man who has accepted that today will be hot, long, and probably involve lifting something too heavy. Again. He glances at you. "Feel like carving today?" You don't answer fast enough, and now you're holding a mallet. Today's task is hieroglyphs, marking dedication blocks with the Queen's name, divine invocations, and decorative symbols that suggest this place is not just a grave, but a gateway. You're carving a reed and an eye of Horus when someone next to you curses. They've just chipped the head off a perfectly carved scarab. "That's 7 years of architectural bad luck," says the guy across from you. He's kidding. Mostly. Soon enough, a foreman with a hawk-headed cane strides over. Not a real hawk head, of course, just a decorative brass topper that's lost its beak. He taps your block. "Nice spacing," he murmurs, bit wobbly but charming. "A compliment. You beam." Just then, a long horn sounds. That's not an alarm. It's the signal for today's angle inspection. You trudge to the north ramp where Nesemkau stands squinting at his slope, arms crossed like a disappointed falcon. Tammuz arrives late, casually holding a plum. "Bit too steep," Nesemkau mutters, poking the stones with a stylus. One side's warping. "Mine?" Tammuz asks. "No, mine." Tammuz takes a triumphant bite. There's a moment of silence. Then Nesemkau sighs. "Fine. We'll adjust. Slightly." You suspect this counts as a historical concession. While architects mumble about corrective recalibrations, the laborers begin their real work, wrestling more blocks, up more ramps, in more heat. You help drag one, slipping slightly on loose sand. The rope bites your palms just a little. Someone starts a chant. Pull, breathe, step. Pull, breathe, step. It's not poetic, but it works. One man jokes that the chant has the same rhythm as a wedding lament. Everyone laughs, except the man hauling the heaviest sled, who mutters, "Same level of commitment, too." Halfway up the ramp, a goat wanders into your path, probably the same one from the triangle race. It eyes you, chews dramatically, and refuses to move. A guard appears and tries to bribe it with a fig. The goat accepts, but only after a dramatic pause that implies negotiation. By midday, the sun is fierce. You take shade near a water stand, sipping from a ceramic jar that's cooler than it has any right to be. Someone passes out lotus-wrapped fig cakes, and you take two because you've definitely earned them. Sitting there, you overhear two overseers arguing over a recently discovered chisel. It's made of a strange alloy, harder than copper, but with a greenish sheen. "Too advanced," one mutters. "Must be foreign." "Or a gift from Thoth," the other suggests, only half joking. You make a note of that. Never hurts to know where the gods shop. As the sun lowers, the ramp shadows stretch long and thin across the stone. A cloud of ibises passes overhead, and someone swears that's a good omen. In the golden light, Nesemkow calls the workers together and announces a minor shift in slope strategy. We will now taper the edge angle to harmonize with the stair logic. No one knows what that means, but they nod anyway. The labor resumes, slower but steady. Someone hums a hymn to Hathor. Someone else carves a discreet falafel doodle into the side of a ramp. You lean back against a warm block, sweat-soaked tunic stuck to your back, and look up. The pyramid's edges are beginning to converge now, not complete, but clearly rising. The angle, whatever it turns out to be, is growing into something real, something proud. Your fingers are sore. Your sandals are full of sand, but you can't help feeling a bit awed. You're helping shape something meant to outlive names, arguments, and yes, even goats. You don't remember falling asleep, but you wake with the imprint of a chisel pouch on your cheek. It's late, the kind of late where even the sand cools down, just enough to stop sticking to everything. Overhead, the stars bloom. You stretch and blink around camp, where the day's noise has softened into a low murmur of shared aches and half-told stories. Someone passes you a bowl of lentils with a crust of barley bread. You nod thanks, grateful to have a dinner that doesn't crunch unexpectedly from wind-blown grit. Across the fire, one of the younger stone haulers is retelling a story about his uncle getting chased by sacred baboons after disrespecting a temple fig tree. Half the group is listening. The other half is asleep. There's peace in this rhythm. Exhaustion followed by quiet company, bread, laughter, and the occasional fart that ruins the moment for exactly 3 seconds. You walk a bit toward the slope to check the day's progress. The ramps, freshly adjusted to accommodate Nesemkow's stair logic, now seem a little more manageable. There's even a test sled left halfway up with a note scrawled onto it. "Do not push. Seriously, we are measuring this." Next to it, someone's drawn a falcon giving a thumbs up. Back in the main tent, a trio of scribes argues gently about today's yield. They measure not in blocks hauled, but in divine ratios satisfied and complaints per cubit. There's also a tally of how many sandals were destroyed. 12, plus one mysteriously melted. You sit beside one of the architects, who's now sketching alternate pyramid caps, some shaped like lotus buds, others like miniature suns. The queen wants something celestial, he mutters, but stars are hard to sculpt. He offers you a stylus. You try drawing a spiral. Too Greek, he says. You try again. Too snake-like. You draw a triangle. He pauses, tilts his head. Too obvious, but oddly satisfying. As the wind picks up, carrying whispers of music from a distant quarter of the camp, you think about the scale of all this, not just the labor or the materials, but the coordination. Every block placed is a vote for a vision no single person owns. And yet, despite the arguments, everyone is leaning in the same direction, upward. You think about the ramps, how workers used slick mud or oiled wood to ease the sleds, how the angled planes themselves shaped the muscles and patience of every person here. Historians still debate exactly how these ramps worked, says someone behind you. Straight on one side, spiraling around. Some even think there was an internal tunnel. You nod. Maybe they tried everything. The other person shrugs. Maybe they did. That's what testing's for. Night deepens. The stars reflect faintly off the polished casing stones already placed near the base. Even now, in this partial state, the pyramid seems too smooth for something dragged up piece by piece. Someone nearby sets down a small sculpture, a clay frog with a smiling face. For luck, they say. You don't question it. One of the overseers walks past and mutters about tomorrow's pulley demonstration. Everyone groans. You settle into your blanket again, brushing sand from your arm, listening to the last few words of a lullaby floating over from the cook's tent. A baby cries, a cat yowls, the wind sighs through reed fences, and somewhere, between the laughter and the mathematics, the pyramid grows. You don't need to look. You can feel it now. Each degree of slope, each moment of balance between effort and belief. The angle may still be under debate, but the purpose? That's clearer every day. By sunrise, there's already murmuring about the pulleys. You roll out of your blanket, eyes gritty, muscles sore. The camp smells like warm dates and last night's lentils reheated with optimism. Around you, workers lace up sandals, some of them looking warily at the wooden crates marked with rope diagrams and ominous labels like Experimental Counterweight Rig Number 4. You're ushered over to the southern ramp where a wooden frame has been erected. It's tall, square, and suspiciously wobbly. An engineer with the hairstyle of someone who's never lifted a block in his life grins proudly at the contraption. This, he says, is going to save backs and time. It's a pulley system, technically more of a compound lift with a guiding cradle. The idea is that, instead of dragging a block up the slope, a team on the other side can lower a counterweight, which pulls the block up by rope. Simple in theory. Hilarious in execution. The first attempt sees the counterweight drop too quickly. The limestone flies up the ramp like it's being summoned by a sky god. It crashes through a tent. The second attempt stalls halfway. Workers have to manually hoist the counterweight up again using a ladder, a long rope, and profanity in 3 dialects. Still, there's promise. The third time, the pulley does its job. Slow, steady, controlled. Historians still argue, you recall one of the scribes saying, whether Egyptians used true pulleys at this time or just clever levers and ramps. Today, you're watching the argument in action. While adjustments are made, you're pulled aside for another task, measuring slope correction at the southeast corner. You grab a measuring rod, a knotted rope, and a partner named Hemi, who insists on singing while walking. The site's edges have become something of a battleground. Nesemkau still favors a gentler angle that widens the base, while Patamos has secretly been sketching a variant that slopes more steeply, but uses fewer total blocks. He calls it elegant minimalism. Nesemkau calls it wobble-prone hubris. You test both versions using chalk lines and crude plumb bobs. The difference is subtle, but real. One angle seems to absorb light, spreading it across the face of the structure. The other casts bold shadows that make the pyramid look taller than it is. A heated discussion breaks out among the architects over which version the queen would prefer. She wants gravitas, someone says. No, another counters. She wants sparkle. Meanwhile, workers just want lunch. Back at the ramp, the pulley is being used cautiously now. The team hauls up a smaller ceremonial block engraved with a hymn to Ra. It rises slowly, swinging only slightly. Everyone claps. "This changes everything," someone whispers. But will it? New ideas often come with old problems. The pulley still needs maintenance, careful balancing, and people willing to trust it. Not all do. Some teams stick with ropes and sleds, muttering about cursed mechanisms and the wheel being a foreign invention. The rest of the day passes in pulsing labor. You shift between hauling, guiding, and occasionally ducking out of the way of a goat that has now claimed the pulley crate as its throne. Its name, you've learned, is Huni. Evening arrives in warm waves, brushing over the scaffolded pyramid like a golden blanket. You climb one of the temporary stair platforms and sit beside Hemi, who's now whittling a wooden spoon. Below, the site glows with effort, ingenuity, and a hint of chaos. You ask him, "Do you think they'll agree on the angle?" He shrugs. "Doesn't matter. We'll build it anyway." And that, in the end, might be the real pyramid, the shared effort. Not the math, but the people inside the math. You lie back, watching a single ibis float overhead, its wings slicing the air with silent elegance. The sky deepens. The ropes creak. Somewhere, the pulley squeals again, just slightly off key. And the pyramid, with all its angles, continues to grow. You can barely look at the stones today. They're that bright. The outer casing layer is finally going on, and it's made from a luminous white limestone that seems to drink in sunlight and spit it back out in sheets of brilliance. Even with a linen scarf wrapped over your eyes, you have to squint. "This," says one of the artisans beside you, proudly brushing his block with a reed broom, "is the part the gods notice." The smoothing teams have arrived early. They're specialists, not laborers, with hands as steady as the Nile in winter and opinions even firmer. These aren't the rough block haulers. These are the polishers, and they work like they're combing a pharaoh's beard. You're on support duty, handing over copper chisels, collecting powdered stone for reuse, and occasionally refilling the water jars that help with dust suppression. It's delicate work. Finesse matters here. No more brawn, just patience. Historians still argue whether these outer stones were pre-smoothed at the quarry or polished in place. Today, you're witnessing both. Some stones come gleaming, others are worked into perfection as they settle into their final homes. The angle still isn't final, but everyone pretends it is. A shared fiction that keeps the arguments lower and the progress steady. You help guide one of the casing blocks into position. It slides into place with a soft, final thud that makes the nearby workers sigh in collective relief. No cracks, no chips, just perfection. Someone brings out a level tool made of string, wood, and a hanging plumb bob. They place it delicately atop the stone. It tilts, just slightly. A silence falls. Then one of the older polishers shrugs. "Wind must have nudged it," he says. Everyone laughs, nervously. More blocks follow, each one turning the base of the pyramid into a bright band of white that shines even under gathering clouds. It's said that on a clear day, you could see this glow from kilometers away. But with every new casing stone added, the internal ramps and rough scaffolds start to disappear from view. The guts of the pyramid, once exposed in all their dusty, chaotic beauty, begin to vanish under a clean, finished skin. You feel a quiet ache watching that. The slope debates still simmer quietly in the background. Nisemkau has stopped arguing directly. Instead, he started quietly guiding workers toward his preferred layout, an elegant compromise between the two warring angles. "He's just doing what he wants," someone mutters. "Yes," another says, "and somehow we're all doing it with him." You notice subtle changes in the blueprint wall, a gentle curve smoothing the lower third, an added buttress near the northern face, and a symbol for increased stability scrawled in stylized glyphs. Innovation, masked as agreement. You help adjust the ramps now to accommodate the changing exterior. As the sides grow steeper, fewer people are allowed near the upper layers. Safety ropes appear. Shouted warnings grow more frequent. Someone drops a chisel from 10 meters up and it sticks upright in the sand. Everyone applauds. Back in the artisan tent, a young woman is working on a corner piece designed to fit the very tip of the pyramid. Eventually, it's shaped differently than the rest, with inlays meant to reflect moonlight as well as sun. "For the goddess," she says softly, brushing it with milk and clay, "so she can find her way home." You nod. That night, lying near the base under a canopy of stars, you stare up at what's becoming not just a monument but a message, a giant gleaming thought built with muscle and sand and 100 daily arguments. Somewhere near your feet, another group of workers is inventing a song to match the slope rhythm. Every verse ends with the same line: "Lift it slow, or lift no more." You hum it to yourself, feeling the rough beat of effort against the calm silence of desert air. The stars are fading into morning now. You blink slowly, watching the first touch of sunlight strike the newest layer of polished stone. It catches fire. Not literally, thankfully, but that glow? It could wake the gods. You wake to the sound of arguing geese. It's oddly fitting. This close to the final stage, even the animals are opinionated. Above you, the pyramid is no longer a jagged stairway of dusty stone. It's sleek, shining, and unnervingly steep. The angle has settled, more or less, on a figure between Tamos's bold steepness and Nesemkau's gentle sprawl. A hybrid slope, compromised yet regal. But no one admits it out loud. They simply work as if it's always been this way. Today, you're reassigned to the survey team. Your job? Check all 4 sides for uniformity. With a measuring rope and a sliding weighted staff, you trudge across each face of the pyramid, counting paces, checking sight lines, and shouting numbers to a bored scribe under a canopy. 76 cubits, you call. He yawns. Again? Still. As you work, you overhear another debate, this time about how many casing stones to leave unfinished on the very top. Some believe leaving 1 stone rough is good luck. Others say the gods finish what humans can't. Nesemkow wants them all polished. Damos now thinks one side should deliberately be less reflective. For mystery, he says. Historians still argue. You recall one elder murmuring whether these inconsistencies were mistakes or symbols. You suspect both. You stop by the central ramp, now mostly dismantled. What remains is a narrow, winding ascent, a sort of spine still used to ferry up final tools and offerings. It feels strangely exposed now, like seeing a skeleton inside a finished statue. You follow it up. The higher you climb, the more the desert spreads out below. Flat, golden, patient. You spot other pyramids in the distance, smaller and darker, like the past watching the present from the wings. Your job at the top is helping place a final decorative panel along the western face. It's ceremonial, not structural, but it has to look perfect. You and 3 others brush it down, measure the bevel, and guide it into place using a wood and rope slide. It fits with a soft click. There's applause from below, then silence. You glance out. From this angle, the pyramid seems to hum, not audibly, but in the way it bends light, in how it throws shadow down its face in long, lazy tongues. You trace the slope with your eyes, noting again that very slight curve inward, a feature no one really agreed to, but now all claim as their own idea. Below, the chalk diagrams in the sand have grown more elaborate. Some now include curves, spirals, even invisible lines meant to align with stars or solstices. You suspect some are just decorative. A young boy, no older than 10, watches from beside a tool chest. His job is fetching. He has no opinions on angles, but he mimics your gestures, pointing at the slope, nodding as if he understands. He probably does. There's a kind of knowledge you absorb just by being near something this big for this long. As the sun dips lower, turning the pyramid's bright face into a glowing copper wall, you make your way down. Carefully, slowly, 1 foot after the other. Dinner is lentil stew again, with a hint of roasted date, a luxury. You sit with Huni the goat, who now has a bell tied to her neck and a sash that reads Ramp Guardian in painted hieroglyphs. She's earned it. Nearby, Nesemkow and Pitamos share a meal in silence. No arguments, no diagrams, just food. You stare at the nearly finished pyramid, glowing now like a sleeping ember. So much time, so many hands, so many angles, debated, drawn, erased, redrawn. You wonder which version history will remember. Probably none of them. But that's all right. Because you'll remember what it felt like to walk that slope, to argue about it in the shade, to pull rope, shoulder to shoulder, until someone shouted, "Too steep," or "too soft," or "try again." And eventually, you did. The day fades quickly now. You sit near the base again, this time facing west, where the last rays of sun draw long shadows down the limestone steps. The pyramid glows less now, its brilliance fading into a dusky bronze, but somehow that makes it feel more complete, more ancient, like it was always meant to end this way. There's one final challenge left, the capstone, a golden tip, a pyramid atop a pyramid, symbol of finality, of eternity. It's not installed yet. It rests nearby on a stone platform, still being inspected, polished, whispered about. There are rumors it was cast in a mold of lost wax, or carved from a meteoric stone, or blessed in a ceremony where priests fasted for 7 days and then argued for another 3 about whether fasting still counted if you had pomegranate seeds. Historians still argue whether this capstone ever existed at all. Some believe it was stolen before it could be placed. Others claim it cracked mid-installation and was quietly buried to avoid a curse. You, personally, have touched it. It's real, solid, surprisingly warm in the sun. Your task today is less glamorous but oddly calming. You're with the team preparing the capstone's transport sled. Special sand, wetted just right, oil to reduce friction, ropes braided so tight they look carved. There's a quiet reverence in every movement. No jokes today, no critiques about angle. Everyone knows this is the last piece, the punctuation mark on an enormous sentence you've all been writing for years. As twilight deepens, torches are lit around the base. Their flickering reflects off the smooth casing stones, which now resemble still water more than rock. Even the goats seem quieter. You help load the capstone gently onto its sled. No ceremony yet, just logistics. Balance it right, tie it down, test the ropes. You pat it once, like a friend's shoulder. It doesn't move. Tomorrow, it'll be hauled up using a special ramp that's been guarded for weeks. Narrow, straight, terrifying. Fewer than 20 workers are assigned to the lift. You're not one of them. But tonight, you sit beside it, watching it in the torchlight, listening as Nasemkau and Tamos pass by together, not speaking, just nodding at the stone, then at each other. Somewhere nearby, a scribe is recording a final height. Another sketches a triangular silhouette on the wall. Someone lights incense, though no one seems to know what god it's for. The pyramid slope, once so fiercely debated, now just is. No one mentions the angle anymore. The drawings have been taken down, the chalk washed away by wind and time. Now it's just stone. Steady, heavy, perfect enough. You stretch your legs, sore from the day's small climbs and awkward shuffles. Across the firelight, a boy hums the "Lift It Slow" song, softly now, almost like a lullaby. A few others join in. It's been years. You think back to the first stone, to the first day someone said, "We'll build it steeper," to that first sandstorm, the first broken rope, the first time you realized this thing would actually stand. You look up. The stars are out again, and they hover just above the tip of the pyramid's top course, like they're waiting to see if the capstone makes it. Tomorrow they'll know. You wake before the sun. The camp is hushed, not out of sleep, but anticipation. Workers move in near silence, faces lit by the dim glow of oil lamps and the pale coming light. You tie your work cloth tightly, hands already dry with nerves. You're not in the final lift crew, but today is everyone's ceremony. The pyramid rises like a mountain ghost, nearly complete, its summit dark against the brightening sky. The capstone sits on its sled, glimmering faintly. A priest murmurs something into the wind, words lost to the breeze. Maybe a blessing. Maybe just a weather report for the gods. The final team steps forward, lean and quiet, each one chosen for strength, steadiness, and the rare trait of not fainting at heights. You grip the rope that helps steady the ramp from below. Not everyone can lift, but everyone contributes. The signal is given, 2 sharp claps, then silence. The capstone begins to move. Slow, so slow. You barely see it shift at first. The ramp creaks, the sled shudders, then motion, a smooth, creeping glide up toward the heavens. The team inches it along, guided by handlers, steadied by lines pulled from both sides like reins. One slip, and years of work turn into a funny footnote on a broken nose. It's halfway up now. From below, the sun peeks over the horizon. The pyramid blushes in its light. You hear a cheer begin to swell, only to be hushed again, too early. The sled stops. A long pause. You squint. There's some repositioning. Perhaps the rope snagged, or a roller slipped. A tense minute passes. Someone sneezes. It echoes. Then, movement resumes. You lean your weight into the stabilizing rope, sand scraping beneath your sandals. The sled climbs the final stretch, now visible as a bright triangle growing smaller with each foot of height. At the top, a shape waits. A perfectly leveled socket chiseled into the apex of the pyramid's summit. It's only been used in practice before, never for the real piece. The team pauses again, aligns it, breathes. You hold your breath too. And then, with a final push, a coordinated call, and the sound of smooth stone on smooth stone, the capstone clicks into place. The silence is total. For a breathless moment, even the wind holds its breath. And then, a deep exhale from everyone around you. A laugh, a shout, applause. Not raucous, but warm, full, honest. Someone starts crying, loudly. No one stops them. The pyramid is done. You let go of the rope. Your arms feel weightless, like you've dropped something you've carried for years. You sink into the sand and stare upward. The capstone glints, not as bright as you imagined, but enough. Tamos walks past you and mutters, "Not the angle I would have picked." You both laugh. Nearby, Nasemkau traces the outline in the sand and whispers, "Perfect." You know it's not. The slope isn't uniform. One face dips slightly inward. A corner veers off by half a degree. One casing stone has a chip shaped like a hippo. And that's just what you know of. But perfect? Yes, absolutely. Because it's done. And you were here. As the sun rises higher, casting long, cool shadows down the pyramid's polished faces, you join the others in a line for food. Flatbread, figs, and honey. A feast. Someone brings out a flute. Someone else dances. Huni the goat wears her ramp guardian sash proudly and tries to eat someone's fig. You lean back in the sand and look at the monument behind you. Not just a tomb. Not just a symbol. A lesson in arguing. A monument to compromise. And somewhere beneath that polished angle, beneath tons of stone, sweat, and stubbornness, is your fingerprint on a corner, your shoulder on a rope, your footstep in the dust. You helped. And now, it rests, and so do you.